Interviews are hard, especially in an ultra competitive industry like conservation. Do you need a bit of help with preparing for an interview for a conservation job? Then stay tuned.
Lions roaring in the morning sun, searching for a longer day.
For careers advice and behind the scenes of working in conservation, subscribe to my channel and click on that bell notification so you get informed when I release a new video. If you do subscribe to my channel, it will really help others find my videos and help me grow. This is the last in my 3-part series looking at getting your dream job in conservation. I've gone over cover letters and CVs, of which I'll link below. And this one is looking at probably the most nerve-wracking one of all, the interviews. As I've said in the other videos, I have recently reviewed 85 applications for a job position. We shorted them down to 8 candidates to interview and then further shortlisted those down to 3 for a second interview and then selected from them. So I've got a lot of stuff fresh in my mind that I want to help you out if you are going through this process or will be one day. Stay to the end to see what I think is the best question that you can ask an interviewer. First impressions really matter, whether you're having a Skype interview or a WhatsApp video interview. Treat it the same as if you were actually going into the room and physically sitting with your interviewers. Dress appropriately. I think people assume conservationists because they're generally outdoors or the view is that they're generally outdoors and looking messy and scruffy. Doesn't mean that you should be like that in an interview. Also, if you are doing a Skype interview or a WhatsApp video, make sure well before the time you're kind of sat somewhere where you feel comfortable. There's not like underwear hanging in the background or some weird poster behind you or some weird lighting. Make sure you're settled there so you're not kind of moving around while you're actually starting the interview. It just looks like you aren't prepared. Also, just do a little check on your computer or your phone before you actually start the interview, that you know where to hold it, that it's not kind of looking up at your nose or it's not looking down on you. Like, keep it nice and level. You don't want the interviewer to feel a bit nauseous. That's a bit rude. Many people say that the most important thing for an interview is to show your confidence and use your nerves and fear and turn that into confidently selling yourself to the interviewer. I don't actually agree with that. I think nerves are important. I think it's weird when I interview someone who isn't a little bit nervous. Obviously not nervous to the point that they can't string a sentence together. A little bit of nerves kind of shows that you actually care and you really want the job. There is nothing worse than interviewing someone who appears cocky from second one. And it really puts me off, and I know it puts other people off as well. Body language as well, like they're sat back and they're like, yeah, well, no. It doesn't look like you really want that job. So my 100% top tip is to not be overconfident. It's to just be enthusiastic and personable and likable and really treat the interview like it was a conversation and not an interrogation. Like, don't feel on your back foot and be like, I did this, I did that, I did this, and try and sell yourself. Really try and have a meaningful conversation with your interviewer or interviewers. The interviewer should have a good idea about your skills and your past work experience through reading your cover letter and your CV. And the interview, it's more like them seeing if they can work with you. And a lot of that is personality. It can really be that the person has the most amazing skills in the world, but they have a horrible personality, or the interviewer just can't see them fitting in with a team. And that's actually in a much worse position to be in than if you don't quite have the skills or experience, but you've got such a great personality, you're likable, you have a good rapport with the interviewers. That'll actually be the thing that can save you, because the thing is, you can teach skills and you can get more experience, but you can't change your personality. Like, you're stuck with that. That's what you are going to be in that job. And the thing that really is key in conservation, you're always going to have to speak to donors or visitors or film crews or reporters, or you are going to have to be the face of the organization. No matter what role you're in, someone's always going to want to talk to you at some point. So your interviewer is really seeing how you behave in the interview and immediately thinking, what kind of impression will they give off when they first meet and speak to someone who gives us money? You are going to be exposed to people, and the interviewer knows that. And if they don't like you in the first 5 minutes, then a visitor who's going to be here for half an hour, or a donor that might sign on to give the project some much needed funding, what are they going to think? How well you work in a team is often very important in conservation, because it's generally very small teams, people who are generally paid not very well, that have to work long hours, and each member of the team have to really gel with each other. So I think it's even more important in conservation that you come across as a likable person in your interview. My boss especially, she wants to have a conversation in the interview. She wants not to be firing questions and then answer, question, answer. She really wants to build up a rapport and see how that person is going to fit into the organization. Okay, and my next tip is to do your research. Make sure you know everything about that organization that you can know. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Yeah, make sure... I wonder if the sign is going to pick that up. Do your research. Make sure you know what the organization does, not just in your role, but the organization as a whole. The worst, most awkward interview situations I have been in are where people confuse us for other organizations. I had one recently that confused us with 2 different organizations in the same interview. I kind of nicely explained the first time, and then the second time was kind of even more annoying, that they hadn't clearly even looked up what the organization's name was, even though it was in the job description. They confused us with another very, very well-known similar organization. It just shows that you don't really care. What I would suggest doing is looking on the website of the organization you're applying for, go and read their newsletters, their annual reports even. A lot of people won't go that far and do that. So if you can do that and really show that you have fully researched, that will give you a major edge. You can really tell when people have gone above and beyond and done their research, or when people are genuinely got an interest in the organization and a long-term interest. For example, one of the ladies that we interviewed not only followed the organization on social media, but also us individually as interviewers. And it's clear she had been following for quite some time. And I mean, she even mentioned to me, oh, I remember when you were living in a very small volunteer tent years ago. I mean, that was 6 years ago now. So that's someone who clearly is invested in the organization and really is passionate about joining our organization if she's followed it for so long. And then if you compare that with someone who's like, oh, what does this organization do? Someone who's done their homework, the interviewer also knows it's done a bit of work for them, because they will know that they fit into that organization. Whereas if they've done no research at all, they might turn around and realize, oh God, I didn't realize that we did this. It's very, very important. Another interviewer that impressed me really picked up on buzzwords or words that we use on kind of our website and kind of quoted things, not in a weird, like, I know I've done all my research, but just showing that they very clearly know what goes on here. I also want to say, prepare for the obvious questions. I'm not going to go through them all because there are loads of really good videos on how to deal with obvious interview questions. But it's critical to understand the importance of these questions, and they're standard questions and you will be asked them. So just think and prepare what you would say before that. A question I do want to pull out though is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think that's a really, really important one, and give that some thought, because your employer wants to know if you're just in this for the short term, you're just in it to get some skills and then move on and get a job elsewhere, or if you are invested in the organization, if you're invested in growing within that organization. I think that's really, really important. A very successful candidate we had, he was the most successful candidate we had, actually kind of made it very clear in the interview that he was interested in other areas of GRI. He was very open that he wanted to really learn and master kind of the job role that he was applying for, but that eventually he would really like to be involved in some other areas as well. And I think that's really, it's really nice. Like, he's not saying straight away that he wants to just use it as a stepping stone. He really sees value in the organization. And if someone says, oh, they just want a bit of experience, then the problem is, in conservation, if you spend time training someone and getting them really used to the job, you don't want them leaving just after a year. Also, if someone says, where are you going to be in 5 years? Have a think about it and just try and be a bit specific. Like, don't just say, I want to be somewhere working with animals in Africa. Like, it's very, very vague. The interviewer wants to know that you really see yourself with this organization or in this job, not necessarily in that job role, but that you see yourself in that particular organization or setting or species, or just to give them some kind of clue that you are invested, and then so you will put a lot of effort in. The other really kind of important thing is, with some of the questions, try and tell a bit of a story. We had a lady as well that her CV was really good, but when she started talking about some incidences that she's dealt with, some tricky situations, some challenges she had faced, we were so impressed with them, and we asked questions throughout it because we were engaged and we wanted to know what kind of happened and how she dealt with it. And I think being able to chat and tell a story rather than just kind of your automatic, I deal with challenges very well, I'm a goal-orientated person, rather than kind of tell the interviewer what you are, give them an instance or a scenario or a story of how that has been demonstrated. Then the interviewer goes away with, wow, she really managed to deal with that situation really well. She obviously copes well under pressure. Things you should not say in an interview. Don't ask, what will I be doing in this job? All that it gets is a response of, did you read the job description? You should know that job description inside out when you're writing your cover letter and your CV, let alone if you get to the interview stage. If you know you're going to have an interview, then you ramp up that research and you read even more. So you have a very clear picture of what you are going to do and what the organization does. If there are some kind of areas of kind of confusion, be specific. Number one thing to not do or say is, do not be negative about old bosses or old places of work. It leaves a bad taste. And if you are quick to say something negative about someone you have previously worked for, while you might be totally valid in your opinions, all the interviewer thinks is, wow, how long is it going to take before this person is saying bad things about me or this organization? If you had a challenge in your previous working environment, then put a very positive spin on it. Just talk about how you handled that situation. Also, be really careful in not being too arrogant and I did this and I did that and I was the reason why this happened. And in conservation, as I've said a few times, it generally is small teams of people working together. and team is the main word. I know you want to impress and show what skills you have, but I guarantee if you phrase it in a better way, as in how you uplifting people, if you were a manager or a leader, if you talk about it in a more inclusive way rather than just I, it will actually make you look a lot better. There was definitely something that you really shouldn't do. What shouldn't you do? Something someone did. Oh, yes. Remember it now. This happened in a couple of interviews, actually. When talking about, like, how would you deal with working with people with authority or from other organizations or even volunteers, you have to like people or give a good impression that you like people, and don't ever say in an interview, I know how to kind of suck up to people, or I know how to pretend to like someone even if I don't. There was a phrase someone said, but I'm not going to say it, just in case this person does watch my YouTube. There's just a couple of phrases that some people had said that myself and my colleague wrote down straight away. This person would not have a genuine respect for people. Those can destroy your interview chance. So just really, really watch how you phrase things like that. You can say that obviously you're used to dealing with difficult people, and just try and deal with it in the best way you can, but don't say anything that's derogatory of them or would be humiliating to them, or I'm going to leave that there. One of the standard questions that the interviewer will ask you is like what your strengths and weaknesses are. And something that you can ask kind of back on the strengths one is, what do you think is the most important strength to have for this position? Especially if you say your strength and they just kind of, nod quietly away. But if they say, that's a really important one, then that's kind of a good cue. But if you don't really get that, then just kind of ask them, what do you think is the most important strength for this particular role? And if they say something and you have something in your back pocket of where you have demonstrated that strength, then say that. So it gives you another chance to kind of prove that you can do that job. So when you're asked about your weakness, don't say a weakness that is so obviously a strength. I'm such a perfectionist and I work so hard. Everyone answers those kind of questions like that. Just try and be a little bit more genuine. It can be a weakness that you are working on or you have worked on to show that you kind of recognize it and you're being active to try and solve it. If I was being interviewed right now and someone asked me, what I would say is public speaking. What I would say against that is that I've really tried hard to get more confidence, and I actually started a YouTube channel to get more confident in speaking, to hope that I will start to get more confident when I have to do presentations. So it's kind of saying that there's a weakness, you're actively trying to solve that weakness, you're working on it, you recognize it, and that's such a more genuine answer than I'm just too perfect. Here we are to the end, and what I think is actually the best question that I've ever been asked as an interviewer. And that was, what do you like most about working for the organization? It's a funny one because it suddenly shifts the dynamic a bit and puts you a bit on the back foot. Most of the questions you are asked as an interviewer are very specific. What's the salary? Whereas if you ask something like that, it's very much a subjective personal opinion from your interviewer. In those split seconds after you ask that question, you'll see a genuine reaction from your interviewer, and that gives you a real clear picture of actually whether you want to work in that organization. It actually ends up being like you wanting to sell yourself to the interviewee, and it really it does shift the dynamic. And when I got asked that question, I kind of went, oh, well, I really like the fact that we're part of a holistic organization. Although I'm with the Wildlife Rescue Department and I help with research with elephants, I really get exposure to, the community outreach and the resource protection, and I get involved in meetings and strategy meetings of things that are actually not my core area, but you're part of the bigger picture. And then you end up basically being happy and selling yourself to that interviewee, and it's Yeah, I think it's a really, really clever question to ask. I think that's everything on interviews. If you have any questions, then please comment below. Sun is definitely rising and I need to go to work. So have a good day and hope to see you in the next one.